So, director can only know that the institution likely invested. I've taken note of it. You are director of National Health Insurance Authority. What's the state of their financing at end of year 2020, December? National Health Insurance Authority. What's the state of their finances? Is it in coma?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as I speak to you now, I know that NHIA is doing very well in terms of claims payment. They have paid claims of up to December 2020. Usually the claims are 3 to 6 months in arrears, depending on when the claims are received and processed. And so I know they are doing well. But again, I know that government is supposed to continue to assist them. And there are some outstanding liabilities that we need to defray to give to NHI.
Does the authority owe service providers?
Mr. Chairman, once an agency engages in several activities, in one way or the other, they might owe one or two suppliers. Let's say if it's a construction, until it is completed, you cannot say you wouldn't owe.
Are you able to share the level of indebtedness of the authority with us? The state of the National Health Insurance Authority indebtedness. You have an idea as director of it?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have specific figures to it, but I know that we owe them some amount of money.
Will you say substantial or is manageable? Have some bonds been issued for them to the best of your knowledge as Deputy Minister for Finance?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Last year, that's 2020, some bonds were issued to defray some of the liabilities.
Thank you, Chairman. You are Director of ADB too. What's the state of ADB? We hear debate of a new development bank. What's happened to ADB? What's government doing? I haven't worked as Deputy Minister
Mr. Chairman,
of Finance
government continues to support ADB, and currently ADB is on its feet and is assisting government in the agribusiness sector.
Chairman, I want to find out from the nominee, did government promise that it will make some allocation to ADB to improve their capitalization and standing in terms of liquidity? Are you aware of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, government did that through the GATS, Ghana Amalgamated Trust Fund. And so government supported ADB in that regard to boost its capitalization.
All right, that's noted. Trade facilitation. You should be interested in matters of revenue. How is revenue performing? And I just want to know from you, since you are responsible for budget, compensation as a percentage of revenue and compensation as a percentage of GDP. I've seen some worrying scenarios, including rigidities of the budget, particularly with the statutory funds. You want to share that with the committee? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think we all need to have a good discussion on revenue to compensation to revenue and then compensation to GDP, because it's something that is dear to our hearts. But I believe that when you look on the face of it, that compensation to revenue is hovering around 54%. But one thing we also fail to look at is what goes to the individual, and whether we also talk about productivity, because I believe that if we want to increase our revenues and to bring compensation to revenue down, then we need to talk about productivity, what we can do to increase productivity so that it can increase our revenue for compensation to revenue to come down. And Mr. Chairman, I think we should all be concerned about how to do it. When you look at our peers in the ECOWAS region, their compensation to revenues around 35%, and ours is around 50%. And so we need to do something about it. And what we need to do about is to help the private sector thrive. And as the private sector thrives, we will be able to generate more revenue. Once we generate more revenue, the numbers can come down. And we'll also be in the position to pay our workers better.
Chairman, I didn't study accounting, so debit the receiver. Oh, who helped her? Chairman. I want the help from the Honorable Abuna, not you, Chairman, but for every debit entry,
there is a credit entry somewhere.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I serve on the Employment Committee with the Honorable Abuna, and in terms of focus, she is interested in the job that she does, and particularly the work of our committee. But conspicuously lost in this year's budget statement was any indication from government on necessary adjustment to the minimum wage and to the public sector wage. Any special reason for that? It's unusual. Since 2014, 15, and 16, we've always negotiated, completed it to allow for the Ministry of Finance to plan, which has been hailed by the World Bank. I have an annual report of Ghana's expenditure plan that the World Bank reviewed from 2014, I believe, to end of 2016. There's a new publication. I haven't read that yet. Any special reason why government was conspicuously silent on wages?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, we are aware that we should always conclude negotiations by April of the current year to take effect from the ensuing year. Mr. Chairman, we began the wage negotiation somewhere in February 2020, and then in March we witnessed the lockdown and the effects of the pandemic. And you will recall that we had to come to Parliament to amend the targets that we had set for 2020. There was so much uncertainty in 2020, and coupled with the effects of the pandemic, Mr. Chairman, we could not conclude negotiations in 2020 for 2021. But as we speak, Mr. Chairman, we have engaged, we have commissioned the technical committee report, and government has met, the tripartite committee I know has met, that's the unions, employers, and government. They have met, and I believe that they are almost at the near end of wage negotiations.
So you are sure that the tripartite is meeting to make a determination of the minimum wage? And
yes,
the public
Mr. Chairman.
sector joint negotiating committee is also meeting to look at the wages.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As we speak, I know this pay would also, they will also start negotiations
you are
for
in
the
Geneva with the committee on ILO and decent work. Ghana, you are still talking about decent, they are talking about decent wages. Ghana, you are still talking about minimum wages. When do you think we'll be there?
That as much as possible, we together can decide to increase productivity. Once we increase productivity, I believe that the wages that we earn or the wages that we pay our people will be not just a living wage, but will be a wage that will be commensurate for
Chairman, I
work
should
done.
be ending it so that our colleagues can have a bite. But back to national health insurance, there are complaints of discriminatory payments. Discrimination in payment of service providers. You pick and choose. That's the accusation. What will you say to that charge? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a director, we do not get ourselves involved in the day-to-day running of the agency. It is up to management, to do these things. And so if now that it's been brought to my attention I can also pass on the information to the CEO for them to look at it. But for us, we take the decisions and the management implements those decisions. So thank you for bringing
The
this to my
board
attention.
should be interested in it, and you
Yes,
should
Mr.
demand
Chairman.
to know which category of persons have been paid over the years, which category have been outstanding, in order that you ensure fairness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see that you see that I should give space, so I yield.
Yes, Honorable Patrick Bama.
Thank you very much, MP. See, started drinking water too early. Hey, it's too early for 2 bottles of water. Honorable nominee. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The people of Adaswase are proud of you.
Thank you.
Minister, contractors in Ghana, you are in charge of budget. Am I right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
You were in charge.
Yes, I
You
was.
are confirming to the committee that you are in charge of budget.
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
That
from
was your-
2017 to 2020.
That was a big portfolio. So you were in charge, and contractors were crying for payments, releases. Yes, doctors, nurses, everybody, contractors. So what has accounted for that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, consistently, government has increased the budget allocation to Ministry of Roads, and especially in years that government designated those years as year of roads. Government really increased the budget, and government made sure that what was in the budget was paid to these road contractors. Mr. Chairman, I know that there are quite a number of activities competing for the same revenue that we earn. We believe that if we continue to increase our revenues as it's supposed to, we will be in a better position to help our contractors. And again, the way road construction is, we need to start talking about very innovative ways of funding these road contracts, so that as much as possible, consistently, there will be monies in there to be paying as and when they submit their IPCs. But I know government has done very well. When you compare from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, the budget for Ministry of Roads keeps increasing. And any other support that government is able to give in that sector, government does it as well.
Oh, I can understand why Honorable Amakwata has most of his roads fixed and that of your constituency. No problem. Atiwa East and West, no problem. You are talking about funds. Do we have funds for Government Agenda 111 project?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in the budget, government put in some monies for the Agenda 111.
Budget, which page? Which page?
Just a minute, please.
Minister, which page?
Mr. Chairman, page 252, government put about 4.5 billion for COVID-related expenditure, and that also includes the Agenda 111 in there. So it is part of the 4.5 billion government put in.
Due to the Constitution.
That should be your last question.
Oh, Chairman. Chairman. Yeah.
4 questions that you have asked previously. So take your last one.
Very well. Minister, this is a general question on the central bank. I've decided to go to the Supreme Court because for years we haven't seen the budget of the Bank of Ghana. The last time we met with GMPC, transfer charges alone that the central bank took from GMPC amounted to $14.6 million. Yet they cover themselves with that independent cloak. And I think it's about time that we test the law on their activities, because you and I haven't seen the budget of the central bank. If you look at the Constitution, it talks about their functions, the functions of the governor, and the report that the Auditor General is supposed to bring to Parliament for a debate. And also, if Parliament per Article 184(4), Parliament shall debate the report of the Auditor General and appoint where necessary a bank. What is your view on the fact that the budget of the Bank of Ghana has never been cited by the Parliament of Ghana?
Thank you very much. I think the Constitution is clear, and the Constitution has given Parliament the mandate to do that. So if for any reason Parliament wants to view the activities or the budget of Bank of Ghana, a committee can be set up to do that. But yes, we respect their independence, because there are other independent institutions. And you also mentioned that the Auditor General audits the Bank of Ghana, so that if there's anything that they need to bring to your attention, we will see that in the Auditor General's reports that they submit to Parliament every year.
You are encouraging me to go to the Supreme Court. Is that the case?
Please don't answer that one. He announced that he is going to Supreme Court. You are not doing anything. Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations once again on our nominee.
Thank you very much, Honorable.
In your answer to an earlier question, you indicated that for the year of roads, you actually increased budgetary allocation to that sector, but that is not supported by provisions in Appendix 4 of page 224 of the 2020 budget. When you look at that appendix, for the first year of roads, the budgetary allocation was 1 million, and I think 1,201 million Ghana cedis. But for the second year of roads, strangely, the allocation is 917 million, a little bit above that. So that is a clear reduction in allocation. To kindly clarify that, why that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, for the first year of roads was in 2020. And in 2020, their total budget was 4.2. When I say their total budget includes goods and services compensation and capital expenditure. The actual payments years was 4.8 billion. And in 2021 is a very peculiar year. Right after COVID, we are now trying to recover. So this to the total funding that was available for disbursement, this is a very high amount of 3.9 billion.
Mr. Chairman, and I've made this point to almost every nominee in the space that came before this committee, because when you look at the allocation to Office of Government Machinery between 2020 and 2021, it increased by 504.85%. Now, when you look at it carefully, the staff strength at the Office of Government Machinery has reduced, and some of the ministries have been scraped off the office. So it's quite strange that even though you've reduced the staff strength at the Office of Government Machinery, the budgetary allocation is increasing. And that is also contrary to what you just said with regards
Thank
to
you
roads.
very much,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is not contrary. When you compare the number of agencies that were aligned to Office of Government Machinery in 2020, and you compare same, you realize that the number of agencies aligned for 2021 has gone up. In 2020, we did not have NAPCO under Office of Government Machinery. NAPCO's budget, and so when you see NAPCO under Office of Government Machinery and the allocation has gone up, when you see, Office of Government Machinery's allocation going up, go into the details and look one by one. You realize that some, and we also have NEIP, which my brother here used to head. That one has also gone to Office of Government Machinery. Maslog has gone to Office of Government Machinery. There are a couple of things, items or agencies that have gone in there. So on the face of it, you would think that we have increased the budget allocation for Office of Government Machinery. But when you go into the details, you realize that there were some agencies that were not aligned to Office of Government Machinery in 2020, but have been aligned in 2021 as a result of the restructuring of things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I also want to find out your view on this matter. I think it's been said on different platforms that your government is a better manager of the economy. And I find that a bit contrary to some reports I read. Particularly, I looked at the Index of Economic Freedom and looked at the Global Gender Gap Index, that is issued by the World Economic Forum. And then you look at the Ease of Business ranking. All these reports are saying something contrary to the assertion that you are better managers of the economy. So, for example, the Index of Economic Freedom indicates that government obtained an average score of 57.28 for the period between 2017 and 2020, and as compared to the average score of 78.63 between 2013 and 2016. Then again, when you look at the Global Gender Gap Index, you would realize that government last year obtained a rank of 107 on a score of 0.67. And that is compared to 2016 figures, where the government obtained 59th on a score of 0.71, which means that under your watch, the gender disparity is increasing in terms of economic activities. And then the ease of doing business also ranking is also not looking good. How do you reconcile this with the assertion that you are better managers of the economy?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, we are. We are better managers of the economy. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic hitting this country, we had stabilized the economy. Inflation was almost a single digit, and things were going well until 2020 March when the pandemic hit. And Mr. Chairman, when you look at all that my brother has raised, you realize that when the pandemic hit, things really changed. Women were more hit than men because women engaged more in economic activities like the selling of things. You know all these things that women directly were hit. So certainly, when these indicators are being taken, yes, you will see some disparities in there because the COVID-19 pandemic really affected women more than the men because women engaged more in the day-to-day economic activities directly compared to the men. And this also affected the way businesses were done. Businesses quickly had to reinvent themselves to do more of the Zooming and all the other IT technology stuff before they could even arrive at solutions or meetings or meets and all those things. So, Mr. Chairman, all these things is not as a result of, it is not anybody's fault, but the COVID pandemic hit and really changed things, and it took time for businesses to adjust. I believe that moving forward, with the preliminary assessments that we have done, I know the dynamics will change, but it will take some time because we still haven't really gotten a hold of the total effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I believe that we will get there and things will improve. Thank you.
The very last one, which is something I'm sure maybe you could take responsibility for, because for COVID, it's obvious that it's difficult to pin the effect of COVID on any individual or institution. But issues of corruption are things that I'm sure the government can take responsibility for. According to the Community Development Alliance, corrupt practices swallowed about $2.1 billion COVID cash. Now, apart from that, when you look at the 2019 Auditor General's report, the unaccounted funds from 2017 to 2019 for public boards, corporations, and other statutory institutions amounted to 20 billion cedis. Given the fact that you have responsibility over budgets, what do you propose to be the way to deal with these corrupt practices so we don't keep losing money that belongs to the state in this manner?
Thank you very much, but I disagree with the assertion that a 2.1 billion COVID cash was lost to corruption.
Actually,
you know, COVID and its effects, in many instances, usually with procurement, there can be exceptions when it comes to a matter of urgency or there's an emergency. And so maybe if you can be specific with the corrupt practices that is being leveled against. But I want to assure you that every money that Parliament approved for us for COVID expenditure can be accounted for, and for some it has been accounted for. In 2020, Parliament approved about 11.1 billion for us. We have spent 8.3 billion, which we have accounted for. And in 2021, in the mid-year, you would also see some level of accounting, or in the monies that were approved for us, provided we have spent those monies. So I just want to clear the air that concerning the COVID funds that Parliament approved for us, we have up-to-date reports on how we have spent the monies that were approved for us.
As a follow-up.
And then you also mentioned...
Chairman, just a follow-up. Minister nominee, are you aware that government and the World Bank and the Article 4 revision meetings agreed to an audit of the COVID expenditure, an audit of it, arising out of some of the issues that the Honorable Sosu have raised?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, consistently, every year, the Auditor General audits all ministries, departments, and agencies. So if for any reason a special fund has been set and they want to audit these funds, I think it is in the right direction that we do all these things to make sure that we followed protocols and everything was done right. So that does not cause any problem for IMF and government to agree that they want to go ahead and audit the COVID funds. I think it's in line with proper accountability and transparency.
So the follow-up that I was, just to clarify the point that according to the corruption risk report by the Community Development Alliance, they made references to procurement breaches. So it's more of managed loss as a result of procurement breaches.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with some of these things, you look at the procurement law, you go to the procurement law, were there breaches, and under what conditions were these procurements made? And so, yes, we make the rules, but at the same time, we also need to look at things. We always make exceptions in these rules, and sometimes when you make exceptions in some situations like the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's still within the law, I think you haven't dealt or indulged in any corrupt practices. Thank you.
Very well. Yes, Ms. Ejare.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Government lately is telling us that it wants to open a development bank in Ghana. Meanwhile, government owns a lot of banks in Ghana that it can restructure to serve the same purpose. Why is it the need to have a new development bank altogether?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as part of revitalizing the economy as a result of the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, government is doing a couple of things. And in that is the National Development Bank. Mr. Chairman, the National Development Bank is not a regular bank or the regular retail banks that we have in the system. Government is doing everything possible to support NIB, ADB, and to make sure the purpose for which they were set up is realized. But this National Development Bank is going to act as a bank to give capital to these commercial banks. It is not the usual commercial banks that you see around, but it's going to give funding give funding to these banks to enable them carry out their activities at a minimum cost. So this is not the regular banking that we know, but it's rather going to strengthen and give access to capital for these banks to thrive.
Anyway, that's why I was thinking one could be restructured to serve the purpose. Anyways, now to bread and butter issues. No, this is more bread and butter, straight bread and butter. My checks at the Ministry of Finance indicate that you are also responsible for school feeding. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And school feeding is usually in the news for all the bad reasons, which include non-payment of caterers not cooking because the money is not enough, not being paid on time, they owe people and all of that stuff. We know that school feeding actually helps children to go to school. It is a great incentive for especially people in the rural communities, where you think that in the rural communities there are a lot of food. It's not correct. In the rural communities, people find food difficult, when especially we are in the lean season and things like that. And the school feeding program is a great motivation why children go to school. What is the state of school feeding now?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I can't agree with my colleague more because I also have school feeding in my area, and I have seen how the numbers have gone up because we have increased the number of school feeding in the Tiwa East constituency. And I share your plight. It is something that the current gender minister has formed an interministerial committee to look at the issues at the school feeding and come up with recommendations that we believe will help reduce the issues that we have at school feeding. One, you mentioned non-caterer payments, and some of these things, Mr. Chairman, it is difficult. But I believe that once we conclude on these audits, the recommendations will come out, and then we will work with the recommendations. And I believe that we will find a solution to the current situation at the school feeding secretariat or school feeding program. But I must say that government has done very well for the school feeding program, because in 2016 we had about 1.6 million students or pupils on the school feeding program. But as we speak, we have close to 3.4 million children on the school feeding program. And government knows the importance of the school feeding program. And so we'll do everything possible to make sure that this program succeeds. And for us, from the Ministry of Finance, we also make sure that we give the right budgetary allocation to enable the school feeding also fulfill its mandate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. But 3.4 and still counting, because there are a lot of communities in need of school feeding program. I take you to your CV. It is not numbered, so the portion that deals with your leadership positions, Director SNIT, Director National Health Insurance Authority. So item 5. You seem to be the answer to the plight of private health providers. They contend that, as you have said here, that national health insurance is doing well because it is only in 6 months arrears. Very beautiful. But when you go to SNIT, where you are also a director, they are supposed to pay every 30 days. But it gets to a point that the national health insurance owe them 6 months. They also owe SNIT 6 months, and they are paying penalty on it. What can you do to reconcile this so that these health service providers are not overburdened as a result of delayed payment from national health insurance? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we also need to look at the processes for which they submit their claims. And because before SNIT works and pays for these things, you need to submit the claims. And I must be honest with you, sometimes, before NHIL works on these things, they need to submit the claims. Sometimes it's difficult because they don't have any claims from these hospitals. It takes quite some time for them to raise these claims. But when they come in, they have processing centers where they fast-track these claims. And like you mentioned, it's become a problem because SNIT also will have to charge penalties for late payment of their SNIT benefits. So it is something we will look into. But I believe that consistently, this NHI is doing well, and provided the claims are submitted, they are paid. I know that currently they are working on January, February claims, and I will entreat them to pay more attention to the private providers since they also have to pay SNIT, their workers' SNIT benefits. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That will be all for her. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Biama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, Honorable Nominee. I first want to ask about taxation. During the first term of President Akufo-Addo, a number of taxes were removed. Now, a few ones have been introduced. What's your general comment on this situation?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It is true that in the first term of the President, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, we said we were moving from taxation to production. Mr. Chairman, we did, and we saw some results. Mr. Chairman, in 2020, we all know the effects of the COVID pandemic. We had to come to Parliament to revise our revenue numbers by 13.1 billion, and rather increase our expenditures by 11.1 billion. And in doing that, we had a gap of about 20 in pandemic. But in order for government to be able to continue with its programs and policies, and also take on the burden of the COVID-19 expenditures that it has to incur because the COVID hasn't left us, government had to do this by seeking our permission for us to share in the burden.
It was less than 40%. And I have heard the IMF too, and what they are saying. So we can look at who is projecting what. Singapore is 126. The question is, Honorable Nominee, why do we contribute to this state of affairs where borrowing seems to be very, very offensive? A helm of affairs where we need the resources to provide the things that should be provided. We then admit.
Let me use the 2021 budget as an example. We came to Parliament for Parliament to approve this budget for us. We told Parliament our expenditures was 110 billion. Our revenue, 72.5 billion. So clearly there's a gap. And in that gap, you will have to fill it to enable you meet your expenditure. When you look in there, in the expenditure item, these are things that you need to do to run your country. And so there are two ways. You raise your own revenue or additional revenue through taxes, or you find other innovative ways of filling the gap. And so you borrow, and sometimes you also use tax to raise that gap.
Is that, sorry, Mr. Chairman, is that like reducing governance to just borrowing and taxation?
It is not reducing governance to just borrowing and taxation. But if you can also bear with me, that you need to continue with the free SHS. You need to continue with the road expansion. You need to continue with the Ghana Cares. You need to continue with the infrastructure that you want to see your people have. And so in this situation, what do? You believe will serve your interests. And whilst borrowing, you need to check to see whether you'll be in a position to service these debts and what the debts is going to, the borrowings are going to be used for. Are they going to be used for items that can best tomorrow pay for itself or not? So you look at all these things before you take the decision to borrow. And we don't borrow in isolation. We always bring it to Parliament. We discuss with Parliament. Parliament approves before we go ahead and do that.
Well, the honorable nominee missed my sarcasm when I referred to reducing governance to just borrowing and taxation, because as displayed by you will continue even if you are not in government someday. But still on borrowing, I have with me the 2019 Consolidated Fund report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of Ghana General Government for the financial year ended 31st December 2019. And on page 9, the Auditor General makes some very interesting, findings. It says avoidable penalty and commitment fees payment on loans. 12. We noted that Government of Ghana continued to incur high cost on penalties and commitment fees, and in 2019 incurred 5,226,605.12 and 33 million Ghana cedis, 68,022.15 cedis as penalties and commitment fees respectively. We reiterate our earlier recommendation for effective monitoring and processing payment ahead of their respective maturity dates. So the burden is not even the debt that has to be paid and the interest that has to be paid, but like the Controller and Accountant General determines, avoidable penalty and commitment fees payment. So we make our bad situation worse by just not monitoring when we are supposed to utilize, some of these loans that we take or make payments of interest. Why is that the case? And what state of affairs does not become the status quo?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first and foremost, we will take into consideration the recommendations of the Auditor General. And for us to reduce some of these things. And again, with the commitment fee, sometimes it comes with a loan that you need to fulfill some conditions. And sometimes some of the conditions they require may not be that favorable. So whilst trying to renegotiate those conditions, and sometimes you incur some of these debts. But I will take things, and when negotiating these loans too, so that when we have to deliver, we'll deliver on time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Rectified. How was it rectified, and what was there to be rectified?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have those details because you yourself alluded to the fact that I wasn't part of the board. But I know that this has been cleared, so I can take the details and furnish you accordingly.
But you said has been paid. Is that not the rectification? Is that what you mean by has been ratified?
Yes,
Money paid?
he's asking how it was done, and I'm telling him I don't have those details, but what I know is that it's been paid. Yes, thank you.
Very well. Nothing else there. Yes, leader.
Chairman, we should be winding up on our colleague. But back to Honorable Suhine, and to paraphrase your word, Honorable Abna, there is nothing wrong. Have you now accepted that there is nothing wrong with borrowing based on the Suhine's submission?
Mr. Chairman, it's a quote that is being alluded to me, but what I'm saying is that
Chairman,
when you look at the kind of budget that
these
we
words are not mine. I record you.
said
You
a
said,
quote.
yes, from you. You use it today. And in fact, to add you even added, it is nobody's fault, unquote. So, so is it now somebody's fault to
No,
borrow?
Mr. Chairman, I gave a
So
premise.
we hear you. So
I
based on the Honorable Suhine's submission, borrowing, President Mahama borrowed, NDC borrowed, Nana Dudankwa has borrowed. On record, he has borrowed even more, added over 164 billion to the public debt. Is there anything wrong with it?
Thank you,
Honorable
Mr.
Abel?
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I 64 billion to the public debt. There's the actual debts that we have accumulated, and then there's also the exchange rate losses that is in there. But like I said, I don't want to go into that. But all I'm saying is that when you manage the kind of economy that we have, where we manage a deficit economy because our expenditures are always more than our revenues, clearly you will need to fill in that gap. And in filling in that gap, you have options. And so sometimes you weigh the options and see what best suits.
Are the options anybody's fault? Chairman, maybe let me put you in context. I'm using your words and appreciate the issue that Honorable Suhine raised. For instance, President Mahama and the NDC at end of year 2016, in terms of annual budget funding amount and earnings from oil revenue, was below 360 million US dollars. You are earning close to 1 billion US dollars. To whom much is given, much is to be expected. Yet you say that he didn't do enough with $260 million. So back to your theory, it is nobody's fault. If oil prices were declining, just like today you are attributing it to COVID, and he attributed it to unstable international economic order, was it personal to him, or there were existential external factors that compelled him to take those positions? Where do you stand, the Honorable Abna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the effects of COVID, you can't compare it to any other world economic crisis prior to 2017. And we are still, not just Ghana, the whole world is still assessing the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this one is incomparable, I must state. But what we are saying is that we weigh the options, which ones best suits our needs.
No, so I'm still on your theory of it's nobody's fault. When prices of gold decline, prices of cocoa is not favorable, it's the same intervening factor. And I say to your theory, is it somebody's fault?
It is incomparable. So when you want to put those two side by side, we know the effects of a fall in prices of gold,
but
prices of
changes
oil.
in international economic conditions can also be a factor. Do you admit to that?
It can be a
And
factor,
that can
but
affect
the
revenue?
weight, The weight
No,
that
I'm not contesting you on weight. In fact, if you want, I'll share even figures with you. Like when you kept emphasizing the effects of women, I've just read a publication that they lost about 800 million. What I don't know is, I've forgotten the sign whether it was billion or millions, but there's a publication detailed on the impact of COVID on women, and they quote some loss of 800 billion US dollars. So I'm not contesting you on that. I'm simply saying that, can your fiscals suffer as a result of unfavorable international economic conditions?
yes, Mr. Chairman, but there are extent to which these things can happen. Thank you.
Your government promised to end the suffering. Have suffering ended in Ghana?
Mr. Chairman, this question is relative. Yes.
Oh, Chairman,
Like,
Chairman, I'm quoting from the MPP manifesto of 2016. Those are not my words. Suffering of teachers, suffering of farmers, suffering of nurses.
Thank
We
you
will
very much,
end the
Mr.
suffering.
Chairman. In this
Have
regard,
you helped the minister
our
and the
government-
president to help the suffering?
our government has helped a lot to alleviate
Do you know the price of steel iron today, the price of cement, and
Mr.
compared
Chairman,
to what it was in 2016?
yes, but Mr. Chairman, before I answer this one, the government has helped a lot in this regard with very good intervention policies like the planting for food and the plight of our people. And when you look at the teachers, the nurses, what government has done in terms of recruitment, in terms of paying the arrears, government has done a lot in this regard. And I believe that this has gone a long way to alleviate the problems in that sector. And the second question?
Chairman, the second question, Chairman, is for her if she does succeed. It's a matter of public concern. Contracts are awarded to service providers. Contracts are awarded to road contractors. Probably at the time that the contract was awarded, he paid 20 cedis for cement. Today, the same contractor is paying 50 cedis for a bag of cement when he paid 20 cedis. Iron rods was particularly maybe 3,500. Today, he's paying 5,500 for the same iron. The Ministry of Finance, with delayed payment, will you have this contract in order to save the contractors? Will you be for that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is a decision that the Honorable Minister will have to take. And
what would be your advice assisting him? What would be your advice?
Mr. Chairman, per the law, I know that you can vary these things up to 10%. Beyond that, you will need to sit and then look at the whole.
But the effect of your taxes is it 10%? If iron rods was selling at 3,000, it's now 5,000, is it 10%? And then cement was 30 cedis and is now more than that. Is it 10%?
Mr. Chairman, that is what the law says. So,
so I'm saying the law and then the suffocation of Ghanaian businesses. And then, Chairman, I end with this. I think that probably, are you the Deputy Minister who served on the Ghana Exim Bank? Do you play a role there?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Ghana Exim is not under your watch. Now, Chairman, I end with it. Delayed payments by government. You see, the contractor goes to borrow money at 23% interest per annum. He executes the work. He is not paid for 2 years, sometimes 18 to 24 months. The interest accumulates on it. So you only pay contractors to service banks, and that is affecting the growth of the Ghanaian private sector and entrepreneurs in that sector. And Chairman, I'm not raising this for the purpose of our colleague, but just for us to have a national conversation on it. In Rwanda, if there is no budget for any project, there is no commencement of work on it in Rwanda. And additionally, if work commences on a project, it must see completion. In South Africa, a contractor's IPC or bill cannot be outstanding for more than 6 months. Your ministry, you still have outstanding obligations 2016, 2017, probably even much earlier. What do you think we can do as a country to improve upon this? This is not personal to you. Chairman, I'm done. But I just think that as a country, we are doing a lot of disservice to our private sector and to the entrepreneurial class of our country. He initiates, he goes to borrow, he undertakes the project really never gets completed. And then Ministry of Finance, and Chairman, you know I've had Minister of Finance friends. Their first intuitive answer, we don't have money, we don't have money. Are you also like that?
If you don't have money, will you say it or not?
Anyway, Chairman, I'm done. Thank you. And congrats to the Honorable Abuna.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Member, I should not be asking you a question, but it's a matter of interest to all of us. Honorable Bodo and Honorable Richard Kwashiga went to court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the District Assembly's Common Fund is a constitutional creation. So any deductions based on legislation of any kind, apart from an amendment, is unconstitutional. Are you aware of that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So I hope that during the consideration of the formula, you're not going to introduce anything based on any legislation, youth employment, or anything which is not an amendment to the Constitution. I hope not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the budget was passed, the 2021 budget was passed with some alignments being made to the District Assembly Common Fund. And we came under the PFM law, which says that government, and Section 15.2H also says that government can align its macro-fiscal targets to earmarked funds or statutory funds. Mr. Chairman, we all understand that 2021 is a peculiar year. Things are tough. We are now recovering from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and government still has to fund school feeding. And so I take, we aligned an amount before. In 2016, the full amount of school feeding was aligned. In 2018, we aligned, we did not, I think, and then in 2020, we did align a certain portion. But Mr. Chairman, this is as a...
In 2021,
89, yes.
I'm just stating it. So you see, instead of budgeting for school feeding, you are feeding on the objection Chairman is raising. You are realigning and cutting off what should ordinarily go to the district assemblies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In computing the formula, what is supposed to go to the assemblies have not been touched. It is still the same. The 50.74% of the funds should go to the assembly, and that remains so, I believe.
Honorable Minister, we are not arguing with what is stated in the law. We're saying that Parliament passed the law. We made an error. The Supreme Court has corrected us, for which reason we cannot perpetuate that error. Says that the law which says that any law which is in conflict with the PFM or whatever law, PFM law, the interpretation, does not affect the Constitution. The 5% only of national revenue, which should go to the all MPs. That is the only life we have. The district assemblies, the little 5% of that money that is reserved for MPs, it does more than the 95 or so that is reserved for the
Mr.
the
Chairman,
time. So
sorry.
without us, without that money, no MP will come back. Without that small portion, 70,000 a quarter, and things, without that, no MP will come back here. So if you touch that one, please be.
Mr. Chairman, that hasn't been touched. I must state it on record that that hasn't been touched.
Very well.
Thank you.
This one is not a question. This is just to alert you that when we approve you with the administrator, whether we'll give you anything, that is part of the formula. On that note, I congratulate you on your for appearing before us. You will hear from us later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very grateful to the committee and to the President and my minister as well. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, you're discharged. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yule Professor Amin Alasan, Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, Maninye Dipiama, Ghana za. Tizamini alubo party, duroma yulombonde COVID-19 pandemic, kashabonle le coronavirus. The partner ka biya kam kat wumde ni nirbe baharla duroma kashapira. Kambon nzang zongo dapsulumo. Mpansi ya jandi. Nuso kamzaha wumma. Gwamnati no wuhre. Alafi tumadunu no wuhre tete nansham kache ka bahadoro. Kambon mpansi so kamzaha wumme ven yalanga. Ka yel nuso kamza zamo dala fe yetwa. Ndan talai. Mabe dimi solo. So kamza komo manga ka nu pabu zogo ka tam kamza ha wenye shaha benzang de shanga sanitizer shanga zala ka tzangle mparatuno he dimi kane ka tzang kom ni chibo mpade zala nyala yi zaman ma pana sa pana ne ti chele na poi dolo ma ti changnare ka tlan labe tnu tumbi halane den lampaya di nyala kwango ngbaga bi abuto vuhur le ven yelanga nyangpang mama ka bo takara be tissue de yan nyahana ngbane makazan hanka panse mama ka palen yanga makalen yina nkenir bene ami palen yanga ge nyangpang mama ka tangal mima ka bol namba shangani ambol ngoma 68.
A kiln, popularly referred to in Akan as fono, has been used for many years to turn clay objects into pottery, tiles and bricks. It has also been the baker's choice for decades in Ghana. Carved with red clay soil and water, bread and other pastries come out of this oven perfect and delicious. But in recent times, the introduction of modern machinery is gradually taking away this way of life in many parts of the country. So, I sought to find out its relevance, and it turns out only a few bakeries use kilns. This is Auntie Nancy's Bakery at Jamestown in Accra. Nancy's Bakery started operating in 1972 and is still using a kiln to bake. Its owner, Madame May, says she got into the baking business from her childhood. She inherited the business from her mother. She enjoys using the kiln to bake despite the fact that modern methods and ovens exist.
We have been using kilns for decades. We used gas ovens for some time, but we experienced a gas disaster in which I lost 2 brothers. Since then, I have relied on the use of kilns.
Her day at the bakery begins at 3 a.m. She first has to heat the kiln for about 15 to 20 minutes. Firewood, kerosene and matches are the materials between bread baked in a kiln and bread from an electric or gas oven.
The kiln drains